It's time for 41 is the Mic, a weekly Chiefs podcast with Nick Jacobs of KSHB 41 and Matt Derrick of Chiefs Digest. 41 is the Mic starts now.
Welcome, everyone. Once again, 41 is the Mic. That is right. I am Matt Derrick from Chiefs Digest alongside training camp enthusiast Nick Jacobs. Nick, we're here. Training camp has officially started.
That's right, Matt. Football is officially back, so I have nothing negative to say. Class is in session at Missouri Western. I'm taking some independent studies. I'm very excited about that. It is called Chiefs Football 101. Very excited to learn about this 2024 Chiefs each and every day that I'm up there.
I feel like there's about a half dozen times that the new football season starts. I mean, you got the start of the new league year in March. You got off-season workouts. You got the draft. You got when rookies show up for training camp. You have training camp. You have when the pads come on.
Mm-hmm.
You have the actual season starting. That's, we'll get to that later. But this is it, Nick. I mean, we're finally here. And we started off with rookie minicamp. That was what we had last week. With the rookies reported on Tuesday. They had their minicamp on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and it was notable for us because we got to see Xavier Worthy for the first time. Really, got to see him a little bit at the minicamp, but this is our first time seeing him on the field with Patrick Mahomes. What were your first impressions of Xavier Worthy last week?
Last week I would say, look, he gutted through the jammed finger. So that was step number one that he really needed to do. And so the fact he toughed it out, got through it, and was still out there all 3 days and was effective and did what he needed to on the field. Got a ton of work in because there was only 4 wide receivers at various points on the field during that entire, hour and a half practice. I can't remember anymore, but it was around that span most days. So for him to be able to do that and get that level of work in was good for him. I know people were worried about the hamstring bandage that he had on there and everything, but if it was that bad, he wouldn't have been out there doing everything that he did all 3 of those days. They would have backed off. So he got the necessary work in, and he kind of acclimated himself to Mahomes. I think what I liked about that is just how many of the rookies were able to kind of get in a comfort zone and get in a rhythm about what they were going to do drill-wise, how they were going to go about it, and attack everything to where I felt like a lot of guys were confident on day 2 and day 3. Day 1 was kind of welcome back and getting that emergency, just getting that urgency out there, and not the emergency, the urgency, and getting that out there. And I liked what I saw from the rookies over those 3 days because I felt like there was no sluggishness. I was impressed with them hitting the ground running the way that they did, and I thought it was going to be very promising for the practices ahead this week when the veterans arrived.
Yeah, I think the only thing I thought that I felt was, at least on Friday, the final day of the mini camp, I don't know if I would say a sense of urgency wasn't there, but maybe it was just because Mahomes wasn't there. It takes away a little bit of the crispness. Maybe it takes a little bit of the edge away, because there's no doubt, even when it's just the rookies out there, Mahomes is a driver. I mean, he makes sure that everybody's on it. And, the thing that stood out, you mentioned Xavier Worthy bouncing back from the jammed finger that he had on that. I mean, and that was the first play I think for the 7-on-7, there was not enough players to have an 11-on-11, but they had 7-on-7. That was the first throw Mahomes had of the 7-on-7. Worthy jams his finger, goes over to get it taped up, and comes back in, and first play comes back, Mahomes throws in the football again.
Yep.
That goes back to the conversation we had after Tuesday when the players reported on the Chiefs Digest live stream, talking about that. Andy Reid said he was going to manage Worthy's snaps and his workload, and maybe his how much he's going, how fast he's going, how hard he's going. But Mahomes was not going to ease him in. Mahomes was going to challenge him, and that was a great example of that day. I mean, Mahomes was challenging him even when he was over there on the sideline getting his finger wrapped. Mahomes is over there saying, "Okay, yeah, you're fine. Get back in there."
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, Mahomes set the tempo during this first 3 days for the rookies and let them know the level he expected them to play at and the level it takes to win at a championship caliber. So I I think that left an impression on a lot of those guys. By the time they got to day 3, yes, I know Patrick wasn't out there, but I mean, that's a lot of football, a lot of reps those guys were going through over those 3 days. When, I mean, other than offensive line, I mean, defensive line only had 3 guys out there. Linebackers had 3 guys out there. Running backs only had 3 guys out there. Wide receivers had 4. So, I mean, like, it wasn't the full complement, especially at wide receiver where they have 13, I believe, if it's where I still think it is roster-wise. But, I mean, most of those guys just didn't have the full complement other than O-line to be able to be at the same pace they were at OTAs and minicamp in terms of reps. So by day 3, and I'm sure they were sore and had aches and pains and all that type of stuff, that Saturday, the rest potentially that they got didn't come soon enough.
Yeah, and Chris Oladogan was talking on the last day of that camp and made a good point, which is that even those reps in that mini camp are important because there might be some guys, I mean, that still make this team that are practice squad guys. That might be the biggest set of work that they get in training camp is that day, as are those days in that rookie mini camp, because now, hey, they're further on down the depth chart. They get to be first team guys and those 7-on-7s, and some of those positions the only guys. So they're playing virtually every snap, every rep. That won't happen for some of them once they get to training camp. So, I mean, that's an important time for all of them, and for Oladokan and Ian Book too. I mean, those guys, reps are few and far between for them in training camp. I mean, we see it. If you go to a practice, you see it in the sequence. The third string and the fourth string quarterback sometimes get 2 reps in one sequence. They might get 8 reps at most, maybe in 7-on-7, 11-on-11. Both those guys got a lot more than that on Friday alone.
Yeah, man, I'll say about those two. They both had tells in their game that I think will keep them, if they don't get them fixed, which I don't think they're going to. I don't know if they're going to get them fixed before the season begins, but they have some tells in their game that were allowing defenders to jump their routes, deflect the ball, and create as many interceptions as they did, because I think there's at least 4 interceptions total, 2 apiece for each one of them, depending on the 7-on-7 drill they were in. And there was no pass rush on top of it. So between those two things, it wasn't ideal by any means. And they've Book and Oladokan have a lot of work ahead of them if they're going to make an NFL roster.
On the right side, Carson Wentz, I thought looked fairly decent, fairly sharp. And one of the things, obviously, for having the quarterbacks coming in for the rookie mini camp, part of that is for them to be able to knock off the rust too. Yep. So that when the veterans come in, they're not, still trying to loosen up their arms or anything of that nature. I mean, they're ready to go. It's kind of like the pitchers and catchers reporting before the hitters in baseball. You get your quarterbacks out there. Nick, we come in on Sunday, and I think I'm trying to remember, I think that the offense went through like 11 or 12 completions in 7-on-7 before the ball hit the ground when the veterans came in on Sunday. I mean, just an indication of just how much those quarterbacks kind of figured some things out and loosened some things up, because Mahomes and Wentz in particular were both absolutely sizzling on Sunday. And we're going to get into one throw in particular, but you've seen a little bit of the 7-on-7. Any general takeaways for you of what you saw from Mahomes?
I mean, the thing I'll say about Wentz first before I forget, because I know I'm gonna forget if I don't. Where Wentz is at his best and looks to be his best is off play action. That's when he's his most confident. That's when he's mechanically his most comfortable that he is. So the more play action he has, I think the better off he looks and the more confidence he gains. So I'm curious to see the coaching staff, how often they kind of throw that in during some of the team stuff for him, because I think that's where people are going to really be like, there's the first round pick that got drafted by the Eagles, and the top 10 pick and all that type of stuff. Going to Mahomes, I mean, look, Mahomes was already slinging it on day one of the rookie stuff. So whenever he came in there today on Sunday when we're taping this, when he came in there, he was wanting to start to get on the same page with Brown, Kelsey, Rice and Worthy as quickly as possible. Mahomes had no interest in playing around. He wanted to put that on tape. He wanted people to see this is what's going to happen with the Chiefs offense this year. This is what we're going to do. And I hope the entire NFL community gets to see this play. And they did. And so now teams are having to start to try to honestly probably break down that playing team and see what can they do here, what can they do there. And they're limited on what they're going to be able to see angle-wise and route combinations and everything. So, but it put the league on notice that the deep ball's back.
Yeah, I mean, and you're alluding there. Let's just get to it. The throw. This is the one that everybody's talking about on Sunday. And there's so many parts of this. If you've not seen the video, go search for it. I'm sure you have by this point, but if not, go search for it. There's a couple of different versions out there. The official version from the Chiefs Twitter account, you can see that. There's some pirate versions out there too, where you can see the whole thing. But let's just break it down. Fourth snap of team period. Mahomes takes the snap, sprints out to his left, and Worthy, it looks like little zone coverage underneath because Jamari Connor was lined up on him, but Connor was not guarding him deep. Connor was releasing him to the safety behind him. And that's where it gets interesting, Nick, because that's where, we were talking about this earlier. You see the battle with Worthy trying to set up Brian Cook and trying to set him up so that he can take an angle to either end up running what ends up becoming a post route, but even if it's just a vertical route, just setting him up for being able to take the angle on him, right?
Yeah, so I mean, for people that don't know, Matt and I were looking at the play after we did Sunday sound off, and we were going over that and everything, and we're breaking it down. And so, I mean, for Worthy, he was taking an outside release, and he was going to go on a go route, or at least initially started as a go route. Whether it was intended to be a post or just ended up a post, that's the question only the Chiefs offense knows by the play design and the coverage that they were running it against. So Cook has two choices there. He can either, go back and cover that zone and give it everything he's got there to get to that spot, or he's going to have some problems. And it wasn't on. I mean, look, Cook's going against a fast player in Worthy, so from a vertical perspective, he's in a good spot for the most part. And when Worthy takes a look back there, turns his head and he sees where Mahomes is the line, and he kind of has a pretty good idea where the football is going to go, and he goes and tracks the football, which ends up making it look like it turns into a post. And then he tracks the football down, and as you pointed out when we were watching it, he looks back again and adjusts even more to it. And so then he goes there and makes the big catch, which I think was down to the 1 yard line in terms of that. I've seen Mahomes make that throw before. It was back in 2018 at training camp whenever Sammy Watkins was there. Sammy Watkins was coming on a deep crosser, and Patrick was towards the sidelines buying time because the pass rush was coming at him during the team drill when he tried it. And he tossed it in a very similar way. Watkins was coming more so across, and it was open for him. Watkins, unfortunately, ended up dropping it. But it was the first throw that I saw from Mahomes where I'm like, look, there's only 3 or 4 guys in the league that would be able to make that throw back in 2018, and that was Aaron Rodgers, Ben Roethlisberger. And I'll probably find the tweet. I'll find the tweet after this now because I'm curious to see if it's still on there. But the Mahomes throw was very eerily similar today to that one back in 2018. And like you and I talked about, yes, what Mahomes is going to do day one is he wanted to test how well Worthy's ball tracking skills were, and he wanted to test what Brown could do vertically, and Patrick was going to stretch his limitations to see if he had that element that he had with Tyreek Hill back there in terms of deep ball tracking skills. He now has 2 wide receivers who can do that. He already knew Brown could do it because he did it with him in OTAs and minicamp in front of you and I multiple times. So he was good to go on that. This was one of the few first chances he got to do that with Worthy, and he got to do it in front of a live studio audience of 5,000 fans. And he put the league back on notice that the deep ball's back, and they've got a rookie that can now do it too.
Yeah, there's about 18 elements of that play that stand out to me. And, we'll just gloss over the fact that not a lot of right-handed quarterbacks can sprint to their left and fling the ball 60 yards in the air off platform, off his back foot, essentially, without really moving forward. Mahomes might be the only quarterback in the league that can make that throw, first of all. So we'll just gloss over that, not even pay a whole lot of attention to that. But what really stood out to me, what it reminded me of, Nick, was, we saw during OTAs that, Mahomes and Hollywood Brown had a kind of a moment like that, where they had a big touchdown connection. It was on a very similar play. That was a little bit different. It was a zero blitz, but what it reminded me of is the fact that I will guarantee you one of two things happened. Either, when they've been breaking down film and looking at things, just even on the field talking, at some point, Mahomes has either, one said, hey, X, when you see this, when you see you've got the nickel lined up on you, and you see that you see it's going to be zone, and you're going to get released back and you're going to have the safety. Here's how I want you to run that route. Here's what adjustment I want you to make. So even if that was a go route that turns into a post, that's the kind of thing Mahomes is telling his receivers, when you see that, I want you to make this adjustment. It could also very well have been that they ran that play before and maybe it didn't work the first time. And the other option being that Mahomes comes to him afterwards and says, okay, next time you see this is what you're going to do. This is what I want you to do. And because that's what it looked like to me, was absolutely that Worthy knew exactly what Mahomes was going to do with that ball. And that's the first thing that you've got to do as a receiver, is you need to know what your quarterback's going to do in certain situations. And, you mentioned the fact when we were talking about this, that Worthy, you see him kind of do that outside release and then kind of cut back in and gets that angle on Cook. And then, he looks back twice. He looks back at the 20 and he looks back at the 10, and both times he makes an adjustment. Nick, there wasn't a guy on this team last year, receiver-wise, that could make that adjustment, that could see that and make that play. That to me, and now, the Chiefs might have 3 guys on the team that can make that play now.
Yes, and in terms of the deep ball part of it, yeah, that's something that's been the frustrating part about Mecole Hardman, is you hope he would be able to do that a couple years ago. It really would have paid off in the 2020 Super Bowl, and it didn't happen. But yeah, you have Brown that can do it, and you have Worthy that can do it. And obviously you had Tyreek who could do that. So, but yeah, those two, I'm very intrigued to see for them to already be on that page day one. That's a great start to be on that page already. I'm curious to see now where they're going to be at in the weeks ahead and where they'll be by the end of preseason. Because look, here's the reality: Marquez Valdes-Scantling should have been able to do stuff like that 2 years ago. That's what they paid him for, and he wasn't able to do it. Did he come up with the big catches in the playoffs and was the reason they won those Super Bowls? You bet. You can't knock that one bit. But what I can tell you is, on a day in and day out basis, he didn't earn the paycheck they were giving him specifically for what they wanted him to do in moments like that. There was always going to be a misconnection. It was always going to be inconsistent in the explosiveness of the route, and that didn't happen with Worthy. That hasn't happened with Brown during what you and I have been able to witness practice-wise. So the fact that happened tells me, as long as those guys can stay healthy, Chiefs are going to get their money's worth, and the deep ball's back.
Yeah, the deep ball being back, that had an effect. One, if you haven't seen the highlights, and once again, I'm sure you probably have, and you probably have noticed this too, and if you haven't, go back and look at this. Because honestly, Nick, one of my favorite parts of that play and that video is seeing the reaction after the catch. Yeah. Because it's not just the Kelsey dancing. It's a couple of other things. But one is Matt Nagy and how excited he was, because that dude, you're right. The deep ball is back, and I don't think there's anybody happier than Matt Nagy because he was celebrating that one in a big time way.
It opens up a lot of his play calling now.
It opens up a lot of things when you can hit a ball like that. And then two was the absolute dejection of Chris Jones, because Chris just put his hands on his hips, and it was just like, what are we going to, what can you do? I mean, there's nothing you can do on a play like that.
But then at some point, you're hoping Chris Jones deep down realizes, oh yeah, I don't have to cover that.
I don't have to cover those are my guys.
I get to watch that from the sidelines in a game, and it's going to benefit our defense.
But if you ever want to know why Chris Jones is as good as he is, that play will tell you a little bit, because the fact that guy was that ticked off that he gives up his defense gives up a touchdown in a training camp practice in the middle of July tells you a lot about Chris Jones as a competitor. And I don't think there's any doubt, Nick. I mean, that video has resonated around the league, because I saw a lot of feedback from not Chiefs fans, but from people around the league that had the same kind of commentary that we heard on draft night, which was, how in the world did the NFL let this guy land with the Chiefs?
Matt, it's a good question that some people are going to be asking themselves for a little bit, especially if the Chiefs can light the Ravens up on that opening night.
Yeah, and I'm trying. I joked on social media about, hey, the hype train has left the station. I'm not trying to fuel the hype train. And I'll even tap the brakes, Nick, by saying it's not always going to be this easy. There are going to be, missteps. There's going to be mistakes that Xavier Worthy makes. Not every deep ball is going to hit. There are going to be some learning curves, and there's going to be some bounces along the way. But I mean, that play, if it doesn't give you some hope, Nick, and just inspire you to believe in what this offense can be and what Xavier Worthy can be in this offense, I mean, dare to dream a little bit. I mean, I don't want to put any pressure on the kid, but that was indeed something that we saw from Tyreek Hill in 2016.
That was meant to be a tempo setter. That was meant to be a tempo setter for practice. That was meant to be a tempo setter for training camp. And that was meant to be a tempo setter for the league. That's what one throw in a practice that ended up going out viral did. And it was intended for that. It was intended to get fans excited. It was intended to get Mahomes and Worthy on the same page. That play has ripple effects that are going to help the Chiefs as long as everybody can stay healthy.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. I mean, you're right. I mean, there is an element of you do some things in practice sometimes just because you do want to show the rest of the league what you've got and what you can do. And I mean, maybe we ascribe a little bit too much to it. I don't know, but if I'm on the Chiefs schedule this year, gosh, I mean, I'm a defensive coordinator. That play had to be demoralizing, Nick.
Hey man, I'm just gonna be honest, Matt. I'm just counting down the hours until Friday. That's where I'm at. So.
Well, Friday being key because that was when the pads come on, Nick.
When the pads come on, people, the shoulder pads go on. They will have contact. They will hit. That is when football is truly back in my head and my heart.
That is right. And there's a few things that, we learned on Sunday that are going to become more critical when the pads do come on. And the first thing let's face off with is the left tackle position. I will admit, I was wrong, Nick. I thought that after what we saw during OTAs and especially during the minicamp, I really thought that the Chiefs were going to install Kingsley Suamataia. It's been a long day, folks. I thought that they were going to install him, and it was going to be more like maybe 50. It could be 50-50, but maybe 60-40 in his favor, and he'd be taking the first reps. But not so much. I mean, on day one, Wanya Morris and Kingsley Suamataia split left tackle right down the middle to the point where they took the exact same number of snaps with the first team and the second team. I mean, the only thing that happened was that Wanye went first. And if Andy Reid and Andy Heck are true to their past behavior, I wouldn't be surprised if that switches on a daily basis, that Kingsley will get the first crack on Monday. Maybe it won't. Maybe they'll still go with, the quote-unquote veteran, that Wanya's got a full year on him. Maybe they'll stick with that. But a lot of times we do see when players are running neck and neck for a job and they're competing for it, that will switch them off about who goes first, even if they're splitting the reps down the middle. But that left tackle job, Nick, I mean, it looks more wide open than maybe it looked coming into camp.
Matt, there's two things I want to bring up right now.
I'm ready for it.
9-on-7 and team.
Yes.
Those will tell me what I want to know when the pads come on Friday. So when those come on, that's whenever we'll start to be able to get those answers. I don't care how they rotate during this time. You can throw any number out there, 10-90 split, 50-50 split, 70, whatever. But I want to see somebody bury somebody in the ground, whether it's Wanye Morris or Kingsley. I want to see them take somebody to church. I want to see them bury him in the dirt. And then I want to see them just lay on top of them while the running back goes for 10 to 15 yards. That's what I want to see on Friday. So until I see that means nothing to me. I do not care. And then whenever team rolls around, I want to see them take somebody and then swipe them into the ground and then lay on them on the ground. I want to see some aggressiveness. I want to see some strong punches from Kingsley or Wanye. I want to see somebody actually want to go out there and win a job and be the starting left tackle that protects the blind side of the Super Bowl champion. So that's the drive that I want to see whenever that time comes. Unfortunately, that may be Felix, that may be Malik Harry, maybe somebody on the opposite side who has to end up having to deal with that. But that's what I want to see from the guy that's going to be protecting the blind side of the franchise.
We are definitely going to see some fireworks, and we're going to be in. I mean, I'm going to throw in those one-on-one drills too, Nick, because I do want to see it when the offensive linemen and defensive linemen have their one-on-ones. Because I know 9-on-7 and team still most important, but those one-on-ones, I want to see what happens. I need to see both those guys dominate.
Yeah, no, I want to see it all, Matt, but I really want to see the 9-on-7. I want to see that. I want to see what type of fire, I want to see what type of will they have. And then if they keep the pads on again for back-to-back days and how they respond to day number 2, that's what I want to see too. But I am amped up, Matt. As you can tell, Friday is my day of days.
Friday is your day of days indeed. Do need to talk a little bit about injuries and even non-football injuries because
hey Matt, is it Friday yet?
It's not Friday yet, Nick. We've got a few more days.
Frustrating.
You have a as the kids like to say, you have a few more sleeps, Nick.
All right, fine.
So until Friday, let's talk about injuries. Yes, the Chiefs do have 6 guys who are starting off training camp on the sidelines before the pads come on Friday. 5 of them we knew about heading into Sunday. We found out about a 6th one on Sunday, Nick. Justin Reid joined the list. Placed on the non-football injury list with a quad issue. Andy Reid didn't really go into a lot of specifics. Justin Reid tweeted about it and talked about it there, but haven't really gotten into details about how it developed. I know that Justin Reid had an event last week that I'm told that he was kind of limping around at that event a little bit. So maybe there was a precursor of things to come with the fact that that quad was bothering him and he was going to be starting on the non-football injury list. Andy Reid says it's a day-to-day thing, so doesn't appear to be too much of a concern. Justin Reid says he's going to be back soon. Just a minor setback. Anything about any of the guys? Because we also have, obviously, B.J. Thompson is on the non-football injury list after suffering the seizure and the cardiac arrest last month. And then the 4 players coming back from injury, Charles Omenihu, Joe Tooney, Derek Nottie, Jalen Watson, all on the physically unable to perform list. We did get to see Tooney doing a little bit of workouts. Jalen Watson and Justin Reed were both out there watching practice. Derek Nottie, Charles Omenihu were both out there during the rookie minicamp working on the side. I mean, Nick, it looks like everybody's in a little bit different phase, but are any of these issues concerning to you?
No, not right now. I mean, like they'll do what they got to do to get right, and so I mean, like again, you're trying to brace yourself for an entire season. So I mean, as long as you get those guys back around probably the second preseason game, that's kind of all that matters, especially for those veterans that have proven themselves. BJ Thompson, I don't know when we'll obviously see him, and then for people that follow on his Instagram earlier this week, it looked like he had been. It looked like he had a surgical gown on. So, I mean, you know, I'm not 100% sure, and I'm not going to speculate on it. But as long as everything's okay for him, that's kind of all that matters. And football's kind of, to me, that's kind of on the back burner. Whatever helps him be able to be okay, that's kind of the big goal for me on that one.
100%. That's absolutely the case. And Andy Reid didn't go into a lot of specifics with him. He was asked about, you know, BJ and whether he was with the team or at home. And he said he's not at home, but he is working on what he needs to work on. So that's exactly what you want to hear about BJ Thompson, and hoping for the best for him and that he will be back at some point this season. But you're right, football, it'll be there, BJ. It'll be there. So we'll move on. Anything else, Nick, that really stands out to you about where this team is after the first day of training camp and where they go before these 4 excruciating days that you have to make it through before Friday?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm just going to ask people a lot. I'm going to go up to random strangers, be like, is it Friday yet? They won't understand any of it. It'll be fine. But I thought Travis Kelce looked fresh out there from what I was able to look at clip-wise. I mean, he looked rejuvenated. He had the explosive. The part of the old Travis Kelce was back out there in the explosiveness. And something else that cracked me up was Noah Gray during some of the 7-on-7 that I watched that Mackenzie Nelson shot for us today whenever I went through all that afterwards. So I get to see, you know, all the 7-on-7 and a lot of the individuals we shoot, individual drills we shoot. But, there was one funny part whenever Noah Gray caught a pass and Brian Cook came and punched it out. And then he had to go try to fall on it. And I'm like, oh, defense is still doing it. I love it. They paid off last year in a AFC championship game because they were willing to do that stuff in July. So, I mean, in the days ahead, I'm just kind of curious to see how Travis Kelce does. I'm curious to see how obviously Rice and Hardman and Nico Remigio do. Curious to see what Bailey does at running back, what Reese Emmett does on Friday and Saturday. So I mean, like there's a lot of guys on offense. I'm curious to see what they do, and I'm curious to see what Lovett can do. So I mean, there's a lot of guys I got marked down that I'm really intrigued to see there about what they can potentially do roster spot wise. And I thought that was kind of interesting that Kadarius Toney spent a little time with the running backs during part of the individual, whether that was by accident or, you know,
He got lost.
Your drill's over there, Kadarius.
It was a blink and you'll miss it kind of moment. So it was like, is he just having some fun, or we'll see on Monday if he's back out there again.
No. So, but I mean, hey, if they do, I mean, I would be concerned about his health overall, but it would be intriguing for some potential screens and as a third down back from time to time out there in the flats. That actually would be a mismatch. So I don't know. It had my wheels, had my wheels turning. Little hamster that lives inside my head, you know. So yeah, it was intriguing. So there's a lot of stuff like I want to be able to watch, but it isn't Friday yet, so I can't.
It's not Friday yet. There were a couple of other kind of highlights I did want to touch on from Sunday, from the first day. That first sequence of 7-on-7 with Mahomes, and we just mentioned, talked about earlier just about how hot he was. And you're right. I mean, of those first 4 throws, 2 to Hollywood Brown, a couple of really good catches. Justin Ross had a great sideline catch. He managed to get the tiptoes down. I mean, that was a highlight reel play. But the one that was the sickest to me was actually the skinny post throw to Travis Kelce, because I think that probably would have been a touchdown in real life. I mean, it was just Mahomes and Kelce doing what they do. Perfectly thrown ball, perfectly run route. Kelce had a step, and I don't think anybody would have caught him. But that stood out to me. And 2, without Justin Reed in there, Jamari Conner, for the most part, stayed true as the nickel back and playing in the slot. You saw him, obviously, he was lined up with Worthy on that play in 11-on-11. But a lot of Jaden Hicks just going ahead and straight up taking over and playing some of that strong safety in place of Justin Reed. That's pretty significant to me, Nick, because I think then we got to talk to Jaden Hicks during the rookie minicamp. Dude, I mean, that guy doesn't seem like a rookie to me. I mean, he just seems so mature and just so level-headed. He's got a good energy, too. Seeing him on the field, he looks really comfortable. I mean, first of all, I'll say the same thing about both the 4th-round picks. He and Jared Wiley both have that kind of thing going for them. But to me, I mean, there's nothing so far that Jaden Hicks has done that has not impressed me, Nick.
Yeah, I expect to see him out there in the field a lot. The way Spagnuolo has spent as much time as he has with them in OTAs and minicamp, they've always had a role for him. They've always had in mind what they want him to do. And I still think you're going to see him as a spy in week 1. Like, if I'm in their shoes, I want him to be the guy spying Lamar. And then if Lamar gets brave enough to be able to venture outside of there, and Jaden Hicks can lay a hit on him and kind of deliver a message to the rest of the league that'll be watching at that point, then that creates that's going to create a little interesting fear for some of the other scrambling quarterbacks down the road here. But that's where you got to have that tempo setter in week 1, and that's Matt. You know what else that means? It'll be after Friday because I'll have the pads on.
It will be after Friday. We're waiting for the pads to come on. And one last observation I've got, Nick, and this actually does somewhat relate to the pads coming on, because it maybe doesn't matter until Friday when the pads come on.
I'm listening.
There's one name that I didn't really mention all day, and that was Louis Rees-Zammit.
Yeah.
Wasn't really involved that much, and I don't think that's one day is not a sample size that I'm willing to take. And wasn't a kickoff period on Sunday. Kind of surprised about that, because Andy Reid and Andy Heck did seem to think, like, talk about they were going to do kickoffs every single day. Didn't do kickoffs on Sunday, but it was an abbreviated practice. It was just a get your feet wet kind of thing. But I was a little surprised that I don't recall him getting a target or a touch or anything. And that kind of surprised me a little bit, because we did see Louis Rees-Zammit a lot during OTAs.
Yeah, I think that certain things they're wanting to get to and work on. And so, I mean, we'll see. I'm gonna use it anyways. When the pads come on Friday, we'll see if that increases and they give him his welcome to NFL training camp moment. And
to the point we talked about earlier, he had a lot of work during the rookie minicamp, and that was probably true with a lot of. I felt like maybe that there was some players who were took part in rookie minicamp maybe got backed off a little bit today, because they did get a lot of work in those 3 days, because the lines were short, as Andy Reid likes to say.
Oh yeah, they were very short. Luis was in a line with him, Bailey, and Carson Steele. That was about it on that line.
And that was about it. Anything before we wrap up? Anything that stood out to you from the players that we heard about in the coach on Sunday? Andy Reid, Chris Jones. Good grief! It was so long ago, Nick. I'm almost starting to forget. McCole Hardman heard from today. Anything that from them that jumps out to you that piqued your interest?
I thought it was interesting when Hardman talked about, like, the big reason he came back is because basically Andy knows how to utilize him better than anybody else, and he's got that trust everything on him and said he had other options, but he felt like that was the best one for him. Thought that was interesting. Chris Jones being excited about being back and joking about the twin beds, I found somewhat interesting. Andy seemed to be happy with the work that they got in, but he knows that it's just one of many days that they're going to have to stack together. So it was kind of, yep. That's whenever people start asking, like, yeah, no, that's one of 12 installs or whatever he said along those lines. That kind of made me laugh, but yeah.
Got 12 more to go. That's right. One down, 12 more to go. I think the thing that cracked me up the most was Chris Jones. You're right. He had some really good material about twin beds and being in camp and trying to get Andy Reid with his big heart, his amazing heart, to let him have a couple of days off during camp. Since he's turned 30, things are different now. Yeah. But talking about how things are more difficult for him because he's fighting 300 pounds on every rep. And it's different than for like Travis Kelce because Kelce has it easier because he's fighting 135 and 140 pounds. I don't know the 135, 145, 40-pound defensive backs or linebackers that Chris Jones has seen. But I thought that was quite humorous. And I think there's probably, there might be a, 205-pound defensive back that might wants to, line up against Chris one-on-one, but
good luck with that one.
Good luck with that one. That is true. Nick, any parting thoughts for you as we sign off and just bide our time for Friday when the pads come on?
Yeah, is it Friday yet?
It's not Friday yet.
I'm going to keep asking until it is.
Well, we've got a lot of stuff that's going to be coming at you, both from Chiefs Digest and from KSHB 41, because Nick, somebody from 41 is going to be out shooting practice every single day, and I know you guys have great coverage throughout the week. You are, I think, going to be able to have a few minutes to join me at least on Tuesday night for the live Q&A for Chiefs Digest on the Chiefs Digest YouTube channel. And there's going to be some new things popping up at Chiefs Digest this week. So hopefully that will all be ready to go and go smoothly. And if it does, I hope you will enjoy it. But we'll once again, Nick, because we haven't whipped it out today, I'll say it. Your mileage may vary.
I was waiting on it all day.
There you go. You got it.
It took 41 minutes, but we got there.
That's right. I guess it's appropriate. 41 minutes. That's how long the podcast should last.
Yeah. Oh, and I do have one thought I will say. There's this thing called copyright. Right? And in copyright, that means you can't adjust video. And if there are watermarks on the video, you don't adjust them because they're put on there for copyright purposes. So just a friendly reminder for people out there, video used that was not shot by yourself can't just be used willy-nilly. There are copyright issues involved in that. Because part of it is when you have a credential, you have certain agreements on those copyrights to be able to utilize some of that stuff. So it's just something to put out there. And you can't hide behind fair use, especially if you remove watermarks.
No lies detected, Nick. No lies detected.
So just a little idea for the suggestion box.
Well, hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Like I said, we've got a lot going on, and we will be back here next week. And Nick, when we are back next week, we will have had some practices and pads that we have actually seen.
Yeah, because it'll be past Friday.
So next week, when when Nick's trying to make sure that I don't talk too much and have the podcast go too long, we'll probably want the podcast to go like 3 hours next week.
Who, me?
Yes.
I never want it to go that long, man.
I know, it'll take too long to render.
Trying to get you to bed at a decent time, sir.
Well, everyone, thank you for joining us. We will be joining you throughout the week from training camp. Check in with us. We appreciate you. Hit the bell, subscribe, give us 5-star reviews wherever you can, wherever you get your podcast, because that helps other people find the podcast too. We appreciate all the support and grateful if you can keep it going.
Until next time, I bid you adieu. Is it Friday yet?
You've been listening to 41 is the Mic, presented by KSHB 41, your home of the Chiefs and Chiefs Digest.